So glad to be here. About 10 years ago, I got a phone call that changed my life. It was from my friend Brian, who is an IT business analyst. And he had just got a new gig, a new contract job with the state of Michigan in their cybersecurity department. And he was calling me to ask me to come join his team. And this was a surprise to me because I don't know anything about IT. And I was working 2 to 3 part-time jobs, really trying to reinvent my life after coming off of a divorce. I had 3 young children, ages 6 and under, and full-time custody, really living in survival mode day to day. So when he called me and asked me to apply for this position, I was ecstatic, but I don't know anything about cybersecurity. It was for a technical writing position. I don't have experience in writing. I am a music educator. But now I did get that job. And 10 years later, I can look back on the time of me surviving those years and say that unequivocally, I was a specialist in risk management even before I realized it. You see, I had even come up with a metaphor for how I was handling my risk each day, unbeknownst to me. I used the analogy of poker chips. And I would say to myself each day, do I have enough chips to do whatever the task is in front of me? Taking 3 kids to the grocery store, we don't have to do that anymore because we get to do online shopping and such. But that takes at least 10 chips, at least. Arguing with your neighbor, getting ready in the morning. Here's a chip, here's a chip, here's a chip. You see, in like a poker game of life, with each chip that we have and we wager with each round, we're wagering a piece of ourselves on the belief that we're going to make it to the next round. And just like poker and cards, life isn't fair. Some people start out the game with a whole lot of chips at the table, and some people are just going 1 chip at a time. But the more chips you have, the more risk you can take. So today I want to walk you through some fundamental concepts of risk management, and hopefully you can apply it to your lives and view risk not as something to shy away from or be afraid of, but actually something we can step into and leverage to grow. So I'm going to start with, what is risk? Risk is 2 things put together. You have to have a vulnerability or a weakness, and it has to be paired with a threat, something that's going to compromise that weakness, take advantage of it, make it exposed, if you will. And in IT, cybersecurity, you're all aware of something called multi-factor authentication. That's when you want to log into your account and it says, okay, I'm going to send a code to your email or to your phone, and then you need to put that in. That's multi-factor authentication. And if you don't have that in place, then it would be called a vulnerability, because that keeps the account authentication secure. So I'm going to pose that as our first vulnerability in this scenario, okay? So we have a vulnerability of weak multi-factor authentication. And we're going to pair that with a threat of what we would call a phishing attack. You guys know what those are? It's phishing. Hopefully you are all getting trained on that at your workplace, if you're at work, where how to spot those phishing attacks. They're the ones, the emails that come that say, click here for your free iPhone. And you click, and then it asks you to put in a bunch of your information. The bad guy takes that and then uses it to get into your account. So we have a vulnerability of weak multi-factor authentication paired with a threat of a phishing attack, all right? So that's going to pose a risk of unauthorized access. That's what we're going to call that. Because you didn't say that that person could have access to it, so it's called unauthorized. So let's put this in a real life situation, not IT. Has anybody ever been on a long road trip in the car or even a long plane ride, 3 to 4 hours, maybe even more? Yes, yes. We all have this vulnerability called a limited size bladder. You can't put more in it than it will fill, right? So then we have a threat on this road trip to our vulnerability. Does anybody know what the threat might be?
No gas stations.
No access to restroom, right? No access to restroom facilities. That's our threat. And that poses a risk of, anyone want to guess? Throw out some ideas?
Letting yourself.
An accident. Embarrassment. Yes, embarrassment, an accident, discomfort, lack of concentration. Yeah? So that's what risk is at the very basic level. The key to risk, though, is that it is something that hasn't happened yet. So as we look at risk, it's in the future, okay? So the next layer part of risk management is to evaluate the risk. And we do that through what's called a risk assessment. We take the probability that this risk could happen and multiply it by the impact that it would have if it actually happens. And then out from there comes what we call a risk level. But the key to evaluating risk and doing a risk assessment is you have to have a risk scenario in order to place this assessment in. Otherwise, we're not getting a real good sense of what the risk is. So we're going to pose the cybersecurity IT example that I gave you into a scenario of if the bad attacker is getting your healthcare information, we would call that sensitive information. Therefore, and they all want it. So the likelihood that they're trying to get it, especially if you have multi-factor weakness on the vulnerability, is high. And the impact of it getting is also high because you're exposing sensitive information. So the risk level coming out of that would be called a level high. It's a high risk. It's risky. This risk situation going on has a high level of risk. But if I take those same vulnerability and the same threat and I put it in the backyard camera that I have watching all of the squirrels and counting how many squirrels are in my yard, and it doesn't have multi-factor on it, then the probability that an attacker is trying to get that information it's probably pretty low. And the impact, if they got that information, who cares, right? So that would be low. So you can see how you can have the same risk with the same vulnerabilities, but the risk assessment output comes different based on the risk scenario that's placed. All right, you guys tracking with me? I see a lot of head nods. We're tracking, good. You guys are going to be risk management experts by the time we're done with this. So does that mean that if we have a risk scenario of our bathroom situation, that if we're going down the East Coast, there's a lot of access to restrooms, right? So the probability that we're not going to have access to a restroom is pretty low, right? The impact, if it actually we have a problem, is probably the same, right? It's medium, high, depending on what you're wearing, whose car you're in, who's your company, is your impact. But if we take that same scenario and put it out west, going through New Mexico, I grew up in Southwest New Mexico. You can go hours without seeing anybody. Nevada, Utah, Montana, miles and miles, right? The probability of not having access to a restroom is a lot higher. The impact's probably the same, depending on who you're with. But we don't just say, well, oh my gosh, it's so risky that I can't go on this road trip out west, do we? No, we still go, right? Why? Because we have what's called controls in place. A control is a safeguard against the risk that will lower that risk level. Okay? So what are some controls that we would put around our trip out west?
Carry a little portable urinal.
Okay. Okay. So like having a backup urinal in your car. Actually, my mother had twins when she was 40 and I was 9 years older, and I have another sister. There's 5 of us all together, my brother. We were in, when my mom had the twins, I remember we had a van, a Chevy van, and she put one of those 5-gallon buckets in the van as a backup porta potty thing, because she had young children and you never know what's going to happen. So that's the same kind of thing. We would call that a mitigating control, maybe even a compensating control. You'll hear me throw these words around. By the end of the talk, you'll kind of hear what they mean. What's something else, though?
You map out your trip.
Mapping out our trip. Excellent. So that would be a mitigating control. We're thinking ahead. We're planning it out. So the probability of us not knowing where we need to stop is low. So we're lowering that risk. What else? What else could we do?
Limit your intake.
Yes, yes, yes. And this, limiting the amount of fluids that you take, would be called a preventative control, because you're preventing the risk from happening. Anything else?
Pull off the side of the road.
Yes, yes. So that would be more of a planning for if that happened, because that would be when the risk, I'm going to get to a little bit, is actually realized. So if it comes to fruition, then that would be the plan for that. I'm thinking of one other thing, but I already, it went through my head and then it came back, but now it's gone again. You guys need to catch it for me. It was, stopping at every single stop, right? So if you're not able to plan and you're on a journey without our technology that we have today, then you could just say, like, I don't know when the next time that we're going to see a restroom is, so we're going to stop. And then 10 minutes later, if you have Aunt Bernice with you, then you need to stop again, because you never know when that's going to happen. So basically, this is the fundamentals of risk management. We have a risk with a vulnerability and a threat, produces a risk. Then we do a risk assessment against it. The original risk assessment we do against it will output a risk level. And then we call this first risk assessment, we call it in the business, we call it an inherent risk, the fundamental risk that would be there. But then we consider our controls that are in place, and then that would actually lower the risk based on the controls that we have, so that we can have, then it's called a residual risk. Okay? You guys are all risk experts, I can tell. So let's take a real life scenario of someone who's living with ADHD. And even though only 6% of the population right now and adults have a diagnosis of ADHD, I think we all can relate to this. I've put up some vulnerabilities, just a few of them, a smidgen of them, and threats with someone that has ADHD. So, we have impulsivity, not being able to keep track of time, being just easily distracted, emotional dysregulation, anxieties there, and the threats. Basically, I love this last one that I came up with. Basically, life. Anything, life is a threat to someone that has ADHD. anything that requires responsibility with time management, there's a risk. So what are, now my risk expert team, what are some risks that would come out of these vulnerabilities and threats? Just throw them out there. And anyone on the phone or on the Zoom call, if you want to unmute, just throw it out. That's great too. Procrastination, yes, absolutely, is a risk that comes out of this.
I have a child with ADHD. For him, it was anger issues. He didn't finish school.
Yes.
Couldn't keep a job.
Yes.
Unless it's something he really wanted to do, he would blow it off.
Mm-hmm. Lack of being able to keep a job, emotional dysregulation, self-doubt, anxiety. Anything else? Relationships, hard to keep relationships. That people you need to have someone that really understands and is gracious with you. What are some controls that we can that you put in place for someone that has ADHD? One of the most powerful one, it's not even up here, most likely happens is medicine. You know, medicine can be a mitigating control. Setting reminders, having an accountability person, planning that extra time, knowing yourself, right? And what I'd like you to catch from here is each of these is what we would call a mitigating control in itself. If you develop something like having an accountability person, buddy, I can't keep track of whatever it is in this scenario, so hey, I'm going to have you call me. I'm going to say, will you call me every 2 days to make sure that I'm doing something? Well, that accountability, mitigating control could turn into and grow into something bigger of a control that I would call a compensating control. So there's a control maturity, if you will, as we put in these safeguards in our life that help us handle risk. So here's a story of my personal life here, is that I have a disease in my eyes called glaucoma. And it basically, it's, you know, when you go to the eye doctor and they put those puffs of, they puff your eye, drives me crazy all the time, but they're measuring the pressure that's in your eye. The pressure that's in my eye is at least 10 points higher than what it should be. And it's been that way for years. So I have a weakness in my eye and a threat of this high pressure, which results in a risk. The risk that occurs with this disease is blindness over time, if not addressed. But fear not, because there's a mitigating control, which is eye drops. If I take daily eye drops, then it mitigates it lowers my pressure in my eye, which mitigates and keeps the disease from coming to fruition. But here's the thing. I also have ADHD, which means this eye drop that I'm supposed to put in my eye every day doesn't always happen, especially when things are different, when my environment is changed. It's particularly hard to remember to do that. So now I have a new threat to my existing mitigating control. And that changes everything. Because now I have to address my new threat in a risk-based way. And I have to do things like pairing my eye drops, making them at the same time every day, but also it's easy. If you think about medicine as a mitigating control for ADHD, that's kind of crazy too, because people that have ADHD don't remember to take their medicine, but the medicine is the thing that helps them remember to take their it's crazy, right? So, but you can notice if you don't have the medicine. At some point during the day, you'll be like, oh, what's wrong with me? Oh, I forgot to take my medicine. Or you can tell, somebody else will say, hey, dude, did you take your meds? Go take your meds, dude. But with this vulnerability that I have with my eye drops, I don't feel anything. So I can go weeks without even realizing that I haven't been taking my eye drops. So I have to do things like pair it with something that I will notice. So I'll pair it with rosacea, like medicine that I have to put on my cheeks for rosacea. So if I see that, oh, I'm getting rosacea again. Oh, I haven't been putting the medicine or the lotion that's, I can visibly see it with the non-seeing or non-feeling thing. So you have to do a risk assessment against the threat that's impacting the mitigating control and put another compensating control in place on that. You see how layered this is? Life is messy, isn't it? It's difficult. So what happens is we call this realized risk when the vulnerability and the threat actually occur. That you're no longer looking at risk as something that could happen in the future, but it is actually happening now. It's realized risk. And realized risk is living in the day-to-day hard times of life and barely getting by. And that's why I say that I'm a specialist in risk management. Because it's not, your marriage is a bit volatile, you're not sure where things are at. It's, I filed for divorce and I don't know how I'm going to survive the next 6 months. And realized risk is not, oh, I'm not sure about my budget this month, I really should go back and look at it. It's, I don't have enough money coming in consistently. I don't have enough. That's realized risk. And there's two things that I found, two compensating controls that I have found are the core that we would put in place to address our realized risk. And those are resilience and tenacity. And you have to have both. With resilience being the ability to endure, and tenacity being the desire to endure. And you have to have both of them. And you can have, we all know somebody that has plenty of ability to make things change in their life. But if they don't want to, it doesn't move. Nothing changes. Or we have others that have no ability. Don't have the resources or the chips at the table to make things change, but we have tons of desire and tenacity to keep going. And that's where I lived mostly, in those things. I had people would tell me, you are just tenacious. You keep going and keep going and going. I don't know how you do it. It's like, well, I don't have a choice. You got to keep going, right? And these chips that we're playing are the resilience that we have. So let's look at this a little bit more. When I think about resilience, resilience and tenacity, when I think about resilience, I think about the Marvel movies. I love the Marvel movies. Captain America and Black Panther and Captain Marvel, that you see all of these superheroes that are doing all the fighting and they slam down and they always get up, right? Like, that's it, like slam down and you get up. But my favorite one is Iron Man. For lots of reasons, but mainly he's got this super suit gadget, he can fly, and especially he's got this AI assistant, Jarvis. And I remember one of the scenes in I don't know which movie it is, but he's all beat up and he's probably falling, and Jarvis tells him, your power level is critical, moving you to backup power. Don't you wish we all had an AI assistant that would just move us to backup power, make sure we had it all the time? That backup power, that's resilience. That's where we have to pull from and we have to have it. It's like the generator. If you live in a flooding zone or tornadoes or hurricanes, people make generators. Hospitals, I work for a hospital system. You've got to have generators backup. People's lives are on the line. The generators are the resilience that you can pull from. And in IT, we have resilience of being the backup and recovery system for your IT systems. There's what's called redundancy. So we make sure that if your system goes down or if it has to be taken down for some reason or it's attacked, you've got a backup set of data and a procedure to move through to get things operational again. In cybersecurity, we might also call it defense in depth. It's a layered security approach methodology, meaning that you put multiple lines of controls in place. Oh, you guys know what controls? I can talk IT language with you. I'm so happy that each control is in place, and you guys actually are the first. You're the front line for cybersecurity. You guys are the front line of defense for the cyber world. The first one is training the people not to click the buttons, right? Or to think a little bit. Ooh, what am I doing here? Before you move forward. We have firewalls and I mentioned backups, we have logs and scans, all kinds of those things. Each one to make it harder for the bad guy to get through. That's building up resilience. But Rocky, he really got resilience right. When he's telling his son on the street in that scene, you don't have to see it, but there's a scene where he's telling his son, he's giving his life lessons, pouring his life into his son. He's saying, it's not about how hard you can hit somebody. It's about how hard you can get hit and find the strength to keep moving forward. You see, resilience is what fuels our tenacity. Resilience is the gas in our tank, and tenacity is the will to drive that car through the flames to the other side. It's what keeps us in the game. It's what keeps us in the race. But what happens when we run out of gas? You guys ever ran out of gas? You got to figure out how to get more gas. Same thing, we run out of chips. Got to figure out how to get more chips. And how do we do that? We do it one mitigating control at a time. Brene Brown, the vulnerability expert and researcher, she calls this stepping into the arena. Mel Robbins, #1 podcaster today in the US, just wrote a book, released it in the last few months, called Let Them. It's basically realize your risk. Let it happen. Oprah, she says, turn your wounds into wisdom. It's all the same thing. It's realizing risk and putting resilience and tenacity into each moment. And our friend Dory from the sea, our forgetful ADHD friend, she tells us, just keep swimming, 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 just keep swimming. But it's easy to just think, conceptually, like, you still got to do it somehow, right? It's not a theory. So to actually put this in place, generate more chips to play the poker game, how do we get those? And that, I would say, I pull from my experience in the past with my day-to-day living is something that I've framed to be called a resilient moment. We find our chips in resilient moments. And I'll give you a couple examples. When I was going through years of hard times, I was working, one of the jobs I was working, it was very unfulfilling to me. It was not something I enjoyed to do. But I made a friend, her name's Kathy. And Kathy was she had gone through divorce, so she was really helping me. And I really wanted to do something kind for her, to thank her for just being a friend. So one afternoon in Michigan, probably February, and there was a snowstorm. After the shift, I went out and I cleaned off her car for her before she came out. And I thought, oh, I'm just wanted to do something for her. So I got in my car and I was going to wait and watch her walk out. I thought, oh, I'll watch and I'll see her, be all happy and it'll make me feel good. But I didn't even get to do that. I just started crying. I was overwhelmed with emotion. And I was like, I'd asked myself, what's going on? Well, I realized that I had not actually given anything to anybody for so long, other than my kids. Of course, so that doesn't count. Like, you're giving everything, throwing into life. But just freely thinking about something and giving it, I hadn't done that in so long. And I had begun to realize or think of myself as someone who was just needy. I had people bringing me food, paying for my gas, helping with the kids, taking them to doctor's office, to doctor's appointments, etc. I was in real need. And I had forgotten that I'm more than just someone in need. So that became a resilient moment. It was a small moment in time, but it had this big revelation. And suddenly I could see that I was worth more. I had more chips at the table. Another example. It was after a long day at work. They were all long days at work. So pick any evening of the week, putting the kids to bed. I have 3 kids, ages 6 and under. And I was going up the stairs. I had laundry and I was just exhausted and I just became overwhelmed. Sat down the stairs, flopped down, and just started bawling, like ugly crying. The kind that you don't let your kids see you do. And while I was sitting there crying, of course, the kids, they come over. I'm like, Mommy, what's wrong? What's wrong? And all I could get out was, I don't have any more chips. I don't have chips. I just don't have any more chips. And she says, well, we have chips. Oh, we have chips, Mom. Look, see, we have chips. She runs into the kitchen and pulls out the chips into the cover, runs out, shoving them in my mouth. Mom, these chips, get more. Shoving them in my mouth. Thank you. I'm okay. But that moment, I felt out of chips. I was depleted. Small moment, big event that warmed my heart, restored my soul in the moment. I may have even, she may have even been like an offering her chips. She gave chips to me, literally. Yeah. But I gumption up and I keep on going. And those are resilient moments that we have to look for and pull into, and we really dig into them deep. Because the next time that I feel like I'm out of chips, I can actually go back and remember these times too. Remember you're worth more. Even though it feels like you need so much, you are worth more. And that refills your chips. So, if we talk about, I want one more concept here of our mitigating controls growing. I want to revisit ADHD again. Because one of the big risks from ADHD is having high anxiety. And it's not just ADHD, but if you have high anxiety, mitigating controls, two main mitigating controls is meditation and exercise. Those are great research back mitigating controls for helping reduce the level of anxiety. So I can start exercising because I have anxiety. But that mitigating control for anxiety isn't just for lowering that anxiety risk. Exercise has tons of benefits, right? It lowers a myriad of risks that are in our lives. And so does meditation. So we have these controls that we put in place that actually grow into a strength. What are some things that you guys are thinking about through this? Do you have a control in place that's a strength that maybe is something you're going to be able to fall back on if you take a risk and step into it? Tell me more.
Just when you anxiety, when your body starts to feel a certain way,
Yeah.
noticing those feelings,
Yeah.
and like a mindfulness moment, just taking the time to kind of identify what caused it, what was you doing in that moment.
Excellent. Excellent. And you could use that strength, that scan, that body scan, in other situations as they come at us. You learn it for one specific reason, but you realize, hey, I can do that technique over here. Anything else come to mind? Breathing.
Need to breathe and live.
Breathing, yeah.
Sometimes you need to take deeper breaths.
Deep breaths. We'll have a chance at the end if you want to share more. So this, Paul would say that I should have called this the FRADET, Risk Resilience Control Maturity Model. But basically, what I've learned is that we start with a vulnerability, and that's a challenge in front of us. We realize that we have to have a solution for it, which is our mitigating control. And with that mitigating control, we get chips to keep us going. But then as we continue this process, those mitigating controls grow up into something bigger until we have a whole lot of chips. And it's this big strength of a compensating control that we can rely on when we look at the risk in front of us in our life. I love this. There's a scene, the Captain Marvel movie here, where in this scene, I think she's remembering, she goes back, actually, there's more to it, where she remembers every time that she was knocked down and she got up. Because when you get knocked down and you get back up, you get double, triple times the chips. So much. Angela Duckworth is another research psychologist. She studied grit. Why do people have more grit than other people? And she found basically it's that people that have more grit have more realized risk in their lives. What it is, it's the same thing. Carol Dweck, who came up with the growth mindset, same thing. You have, and Paul talked about it this morning, you have to step into the risk in front of us, allow it to be realized in order to grow. Because the more risk that we have, the more that we can build on it as a foundation. And the more chips we have, the more risk we can take. And with that, I will end my formal presentation, but take some questions or comments. Anyone have any other insight to share?